by any means necessary. That's our motto. We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary. We don't feel that in 1964, living in a country that is supposedly based upon freedom and supposedly the leader of the free world, we don't think that we should have to sit around and wait for some segregationist congressman and senators and a president from Texas in Washington, D.C. to make up their mind. That our people are due now some degree of civil rights. No, they want it now, or we don't think anybody should have it.
All right, so again, listening to him now and seeing some of those images and knowing where he came from, right, is again the beauty of Malcolm. Because there's so many of us who have taken that same path. Who, if you have met me or some of us 10, 15 years ago, maybe not that long ago, but that short period of time, maybe a little longer than that, you might say, well, who's this? What is he going to do? And I think we have to be careful how we judge some of our young people in particular, because they do have that same genius and brilliance within them that we just have to give them the opportunity to bring out. So we want to move now to another excerpt from that same time period of that hustler mentality, that idea of being almost an animal, as he would describe himself in his autobiography. And so we're going to have our brother Darryl Hughley come on up and share his rendition and interpretation.
Another aspect of Brother Malcolm's life. First of all, I'd like to thank our frat brothers of Iota Theta Fraternity Incorporated, and also the members of the community for coming out to celebrate this event. And also my former educator and teacher over here too. Y'all don't know that. We go back Martin Street, Barber Street, Enfield, and to see him today is just a beautiful thing, because you know, he got me out of a lot of trouble when I was a youth. He used to just bring me to the side and teach me a lot. Much like when we hear how Malcolm is incarcerated, and Bimby did as well with him, from Calvin with me when I was a youth. So he said, I started a total of 7 years in prison. Now when I try to separate that first year, plus that I spent at Charleston, it runs all together in memory of nutmeg and other semi-drugs, cursing guards, throwing things out of my cell, balking in line, dropping my tray in the dining hall, refusing to answer number, claiming I forgot it, and things like that. I preferred the solitary that this behavior brought to me. I would pace for hours like a caged leopard, viciously cursing aloud myself, and my favorite targets were the Bible and God. But there was a legal limit to how much time one could be kept in solitary. Eventually, the men in the cell block had a name for me. The name became Satan, because of my anti-religious attitude. The first man I met in prison who made any positive impression on me whatsoever was a fellow named Bimby. I met him in 1947 at Charleston. He was a light, kind of red-complexioned Negro, as I was, about my height, and he had freckles. Bimby, an old-time burglar, had been in many prisons. In the license plate shop where our gang worked, he operated the machine that stamped out the numbers. I, along with the conveyor belt, where the numbers were painted, was there with him. Bimby was the first Negro convict that I'd known who didn't respond to, "What you know, Daddy?" Often after we had done our day's license plate quotas, we would sit around, perhaps 15 of us, to listen to Bimby. Normally, white prisoners would think of listening to Negro prisoners' opinions on anything. They wouldn't even think about it. But guards even would wander over close to hear Bimby on any subject. He would have a cluster of people riveted, often on odd subjects that you would never think of. He would prove to us, dipping into the science of human behavior, that the only difference between us and outside people was that we had been caught. He liked to talk about historical events and figures. When he talked about the history of Concord, where I was to be transferred later, you would have thought he was hired by the Chamber of Commerce. and I wasn't the first inmate who had ever heard of Thoreau until Bimby expounded upon him. Bimby was known as the library's best customer. What fascinated me about him the most was that he was the first man I'd ever seen command total respect with his words. Bimby seldom said much to me. He was gruff to individuals, but I sensed he liked me. What made me seek his friendship was when I heard him discuss religion. I consider myself beyond atheism. I was Satan, but Bimby put the atheist philosophy in a framework, so to speak, that ended my vicious cursing attacks. My approach sounded so weak alongside his, and he never used a foul word. Out of the blue one day, Bimby told me flatly, as his way, that I had some brains if I used them. I had wanted his friendship, not that kind of advice. I might have cursed another convict, but nobody cursed Bimby. He told me I should take advantage of the prison correspondence courses and in the library. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies. Everybody is here. As many of you know, last March, when it was announced that I was no longer in the Black Muslim movement, it was pointed out that it was my intention to work among the 22 million non-Muslim Afro-Americans and to try and form some type of organization or create a situation where the young people, our young people, the students and others, could study the problems of our people for a period of time and then come up with a new analysis and give us some new ideas and some new suggestions as to how to approach a problem that too many other people have been playing around with for too long. And that we would have some kind of meeting and determine at a later date whether to form a black nationalist party or a black nationalist army. There have been many of our people across the country from all walks of life who have taken it upon themselves to try and pool their ideas and to come up with some kind of solution to the problem that confronts all of our people. And tonight we are here to try and get an understanding of what it is they've come up with. Also, recently, when I was blessed to make a trip or a pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, where I met many people from all over the world, plus spent many weeks in Africa, trying to broaden my own scope and get more of an open mind to look at the problem as it actually is. One of the things that I realized, and I realized this even before going over there, was that our African brothers have gained their independence faster than you and I here in America have. They've also gained recognition and respect as human beings much faster than you and I. Just 10 years ago on the African continent, our people were colonized. They were suffering all forms of colonization, oppression, exploitation, degradation, humiliation, discrimination, and every other kind of Asian. And in a short time, they have gained more independence, more recognition, more respect as human beings than you and I have. And I live in a country which is supposed to be the citadel of education, freedom, justice, democracy, all of those other pretty sounding. So it was our intention to try and find out what was our African brothers doing to get results so that you and I could study what they had and perhaps gain from that study or benefit from their experiences. And my traveling over there was designed to help to find out how. One of the first things that the independent African nations did was to form an organization called the Organization of African Unity. The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way.
Okay, so we're going to proceed with one more element in terms of the experience of Brother Malcolm while in prison, and then we'll move to the Malcolm X that we are most familiar with, and then we'll proceed ultimately wrapping up with Brother Bruce Brown. But before we have Brother Abdul Rahman Muhammad come forward, I just want to say a quick piece about the fact that I've known his dad for over 20 years, in terms of him coming. His father spoke in Weaver High School to my classes when I was just beginning my career in education, and then working with his dad in terms of his leadership with the village and numerous other organizations in which he was a great foundation, a brick builder, if you will, for many people to come. And then meeting his son with the My People organization and the counseling and the help that they're trying to provide our young people and adults in terms of surviving and thriving in our community. So it's an honor to have you with us, and I'm certainly glad this is a chance for us to come together. As I said, another brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and a way to strengthen that bond, and we're looking forward to other events in the future. So welcome.
I thought I would greet you guys with a greeting with peace. Assalamu alaikum. And I'll read this excerpt. I did write Elijah Muhammad. He lived in Chicago at the time at 6116 South Michigan Ave. At least 25 times I must have written that first one-page letter to him, over and over. I was trying to make it both legible and understandable. I practically couldn't read my handwriting myself. It shamed me even to remember it. My spelling and grammar were as bad, if not worse. Anyway, as well as I could express it, I said I had been told about him by my brothers and sisters, and I apologized for my poor letter. Mr. Muhammad sent me a typed reply. It had an all but electric effect on me to see the signature of the messenger of Allah. After he welcomed me into the true knowledge, he gave me something to think about. The black prisoner, he said, symbolized white society's crime of keeping black men oppressed and deprived and ignorant and unable to get decent jobs, turning them into criminals. He told me to have courage. He even enclosed some money for me, a $5 bill. Mr. Muhammad sends money all over the country to prisoners, to prison inmates who write him, probably to this day. Regularly, my family wrote to me, turn to Allah, pray to the East. The hardest test I've ever faced in my life was praying, you understand. My comprehending, my believing the teachings of Mr. Muhammad had only required my mind saying to me, that's right, or I never thought of that. But bending my knees to pray, that act, well, that took me a week. You know what my life had been. Picking up a lock to rob someone's house was the only way my knees had ever been bent before. I had to force myself to bend my knees, and waves of shame and embarrassment would force me back up. For evil to bend its knees, admitting guilt, to employ the forgiveness of God is the hardest thing in the world. It's easy for me to see and say that now, but then when I was the personification of evil, I was going through it. Again and again, I would force myself back down into the praying to Allah posture. When I finally was able to make myself stay down, I didn't know what to say to Allah.